has, distributed widely that we've asked people to sign saying, please keep the mortgage interest deduction exactly as it is. Don't touch it, it's great. And a lot of people have signed on. A few of the people we met with were very supportive of that, but they are involved in the actual, or likely to be involved in the actual negotiations towards tax reform. And their comment was, everything needs to be on the table. If we're going to do this, everything needs to be on the table, because if I take this off the table, someone else is going to take something else off the table, and we're never going to get anywhere. So continue to be alert to all the information you're getting from the Alameda Association, CAR and NAR, because this will be an issue. For anyone that was around in '86, we had the same kind of promises, and then what happens is, it's 11:45 and you've got a midnight deadline, and the bill is this big, and deals are cut and things go forward, and all of a sudden you have a $1 million cap, right, for the mortgage interest deduction. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the tax code and tax rates. Again, I highly recommend a book. I'm about halfway through it, by Bruce Bartlett. It's called The Benefit and the Burden. He actually worked in the Reagan administration. He also worked for Jack Kemp. So his conservative Republican credentials are exemplary. But compared to what's going on today, he hasn't moved to the left, but everyone else has moved really far to the right. At least that's his analysis, and he's been making the rounds. But it's really interesting, and I think very important for us all to get educated about what the actual rates are and how things are, how things kind of fit together. I don't think, however, that tax reform is our biggest issue. I think our biggest issue is the future of the secondary mortgage market. In 2011, over 90% of the mortgages originated in the United States were bought by Fannie, Freddie, or insured by the FHA, well over 90%. Where's the private market? Well, the private market would be happy to be there with a few requests, and if you've been following Bill Gross at PIMCO, who I respect a great deal, his comment is this: look, private sector, we go in and buy mortgage-backed securities, no problem, but I'd really like every mortgage to have, how about a 30% down payment? And maybe a 300 basis point spread would be enough to compensate for the risk of holding mortgages, because, they might default and there might be some fraud in how they were originated. So it's not that the private sector can't be there, the question is at what cost. So. One of the constructs in the Dodd-Frank legislation was the qualified residential mortgage. And essentially what it defines is what the bill said was a safe mortgage. Safe meaning that if a lender originates a mortgage that conforms to the QRM requirements, they can sell the whole thing up the chain, securitize it, they don't have to keep any of it in portfolio. But if it's not QRM, they have to keep 5% in their portfolio. And the argument being, and it's a good one, you'll make better loans if you have to have some skin in the game. The problem that organized real estate has with QRM is the way it's been subsequently defined, and it hasn't even been by the people who put QRM in the bill in the first place. It's happened in Congress. But the requirement for a 20% down payment. As much as housing prices have adjusted down in California, they're still higher than a lot of other places, and it's still a hurdle for first-time buyers. And there's no statistically significant difference between default rates, for example, on a 15% down mortgage and a 20% down mortgage. So that's why, organized real estate has been kind of fighting so hard on this issue, because can you imagine a committee a year or two from now really getting down to basics on what the future of Fannie and Freddie is going to look like, or a secondary mortgage market that has some kind of a government guarantee, right? And how easy would it be to say, well, let's just say that this new entity can only buy QRMs. Does that make sense? Consistent? We know that these are safe mortgages. The problem is, over the last 12 years, less than 1 in 5 of the Fannie Freddie loans have met QRM, right? So it's just an example, I think, of the nuances that we're dealing with at the federal level. There's no homebuyer tax credits in our future. I really don't see anything specifically targeted towards housing. Now the administration just this week came out with another program. So if you're in an FHA loan and want to refi, your fees are cut in half. So that's good news. They've come out with a number of things over the last couple of weeks. The problem is none of them are mandatory on the part of lenders. And so everything that, HARP and HAMP and everything that they've come out with has really, touched 20% of the supposed audience or the number of people that they were going to get. So it's been an uphill battle. Let me just say this. This is a slide just kind of summarizes that we're going to continue to see an acceleration of growth off 2011 this year, about 2.6%, below the 3% that we're targeting, but obviously moving in the right direction. Job growth about flat with last year. The unemployment rate, again, as the economy improves, you have more of the discouraged workers getting back in the game, and that tends to keep the unemployment rate from improving as fast as you think it should. CPI about 2.3% and real disposable income about 1.5%. If mortgage rates are higher, and if rates in general are higher a year from now than they are right now, we will all be happy, because it will mean the economy's much healthier and growing faster than we think it's going to be. Then another year or two later, the Fed is going to have a real problem, because they're going to have to remove the reserves from the system in order to prevent all of that liquidity from pushing inflation higher. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to do that. What I'd like to do now is switch gears and talk about the California housing market. This is just a real high-level overview of closed escrows for existing single-family homes, starting in 1970, going through last year in red. You can see how cyclical our business is. And then the blue line is membership in the California Association of Realtors. We have seen there's about a two-year lag between what happens in the market and what happens to membership. And the market peaked in 04 and 05. Our membership peaked in 2006. We had 211,000 California realtors. We're expecting about 155,000 this year. And there's still an awful lot of members who aren't making enough money to support themselves. So it's a healthy thing to kind of have a shakeout, if you will, but I don't think the shakeout is over. As you look at the last 12 years, you can clearly see the housing boom from 02 to 05. You can clearly see the drop in sales in the fourth quarter of 05. That's when we first started to see sales below where they were a year ago. In Sacramento, that started to happen in 04. In San Francisco and San Mateo, it started to happen in 08. It just depended how close you were to where they build all the new houses and had a lot of subprime loans. The high end was actually doing well until the financial system seized. Just fascinating. Anyway, the bottom of the market in the fall of 2007. In 8 and 9, very strong in the inland areas in the REO. Those properties were selling well below replacement costs. A lot of investor interest, there still is. In 2010, the first half of the year was stimulated by the tax credits, right? So that was great. Then we had a few months where things pulled back because you kind of pushed some transactions forward. Ended the year, went into 2011 pretty strong, a little bit of a pullback through the summer, and ended the year in pretty good shape. I mean, when we're over 500,000 units at an annual pace, I think that's a good, kind of a healthy benchmark. We would have, given rates, a much higher level of transactions if we had more inventory, and that really is a theme throughout the state. There just isn't enough enough, particularly REO, to sell, and the short sales are still taking too long to sell. Now, for those of you that were following the whole bulk sale issue, that was one of the things we hit Congress pretty hard on last week, because California doesn't need help from Wall Street to sell our REO, right? The investors that the realtors are working with and the first-time buyers are doing an excellent job of clearing that market. In fact, we can use more REO, and I'm not suggesting that it would be ideal to have lenders dump all their all their REO properties tomorrow. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying that we don't need a bulk sale solution in a market that's doing a very good job of clearing all on its own. The January data, about 25.9% of the closings statewide were REO, 23.8% were short, and about 50% were equity sales. And by that I mean not distressed. The seller actually had equity in their home. It's back to, it used to be the way we were. Here's just an example of some of the local counties around the Bay, and I just wanted you to see the difference between a Solano County, where 74% of the closings in January were distressed, versus Marin, where it was 39% of the closings were distressed. And you can get this data out of your MLS for Alameda or a city or a zip code or whatever you want. But the great opportunity in this market is aggregate data is always misleading to you and your client. So it gives you a great opportunity to compare and contrast. What's going on with prices? Again, I would suggest that it's much more helpful to look at the equity market versus the REO market versus the short sale market. And in terms of prices, the price for the REO is the lowest, but those prices are the most stable and in fact moving up because demand is so strong. But anyway, just going back to the statewide data, we peaked in May of 2007. We dropped 59%. To February of, I know, I agree, that was tough. February of 2009, we had double-digit gains in 2009 and 2010, and for the last year or so, there hasn't been much movement. Not much movement down, not much movement up. Now, what I've done here is I've just taken the trough price wherever that was. So let me just explain this. So in California, prices bottomed in February of 2009. That's for the state as a whole, with a median of 245,230. In January of 2012, the statewide median was 268,280 for a change from the bottom of plus 9.4%. Please note that Alameda County also bottomed about the same time in January of 2009 at 346,236. And in January, Alameda was 395,830 for an increase of 14.3%. So the strongest upward movement in any of the major counties, any of the counties in the Bay Area. I mentioned the lack of inventory. We have a 5.5 month supply of homes on the market statewide. A normal supply is between 6 and 7. Look at this. REO sales in January, for the REO market, we had a 2.7 month supply of homes on the market. Equity sales, 7.1, about normal, and short sales, 8.2, above normal. In fact, the short sale inventory is lasting longer than the Kardashian wedding. In fact, doing a short sale in California is a real commitment. Real commitment. If you look at the upper end of the market, and again, you can tailor this to your farm, but for the big picture, for properties priced over $1 million, we've got 13.7 months of inventory, and for properties priced under $300,000, we've got a 4.9 months of inventory. So the higher you go, the more competition there is for buyers. The lower you go, the more competition there is for for sellers for the property. Housing affordability is fabulous. Look at the huge increase in housing affordability as prices dropped and then as rates came down. So if you are a first-time buyer with a solid job in California today, it's amazing. If you are an investor, and our cash purchases are at historic highs in California because of the investor activity, and that's why all of the areas in California ought to be of interest to you.